And good morning, everybody. My name is Nicholas Whitaker. I'm the Media Outreach Manager on the News Lab at Google. And I've got my colleague, Jen Lee, here with us today. We're going to be talking a lot about Google Trends. And in fact, we're going to be talking about Google Trends for the next 4 weeks. This is the first of 4 Google Trends office hours. So if you are a broadcaster, or a reporter, or a journalist, or just somebody that's interested in what the world is searching for and how to put your finger on the pulse of what people are interested in, these are perfect sessions for you. We will be taking information from, or I'm sorry, we're taking questions from the audience via our Q&A app. So if you are on YouTube or on Google+, you can add your comments in the comment section below. Those comments will pop up within the Hangout, and then we'll be able to answer those as we go on. But we definitely have a lot of information to cover today. We started a little bit late, so apologies for that. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, but we're off and running now and quite excited to talk to all of you today. Just another quick note about housekeeping. We have a website, which I definitely recommend you check out. If you go to g.co/newslab, you will find an incredible wealth of information on not just Google Trends, but all of our various different tools. You can find self-paced learning and training on our Tools tab, as well as a lot of information and case studies of other newsrooms that have been using Google Trends and other tools in the media over the last several months. And you can also find information about our other programs, which we won't have time to get into today, but we have other sessions which we'll be talking about that as well. So again, don't forget, add your comments and questions into the Q&A app, and we'll hopefully hear from you. Jen, you want to talk a little bit about what you do and who you are and what are we doing today?
Yeah, thanks for that intro. So my name is Jen Lee. I am the Deputy Data Editor with the Google News Lab. I work primarily within our trends effort, which really means that I get to look at Google search data and see what interesting stories can be told and run different experiments to see what might be interesting for the day. So a lot of people here might have seen us from our Twitter handle. So every single day we're pushing out different content that's relevant to the daily news. So every day, whether it's for a smaller event, or a larger event like today's the NBA Finals, we'll definitely be putting out interesting trends and insights around the NBA Finals. We're constantly looking for interesting insights.
That's great. And where would people go for more information about Google Trends, or where would the first place be that you would direct them? Obviously, we have training and tutorials on the g.co/newslab site, but where are all the other deeper resources available?
Yeah, so I'd say that there are probably 3 primary resources that you can look at aside from the trainings that we have on our News Lab website. The first is going directly to our Google Trends website itself, google.com/trends. And I can present that in just a moment and we can dive into that. That's the primary resource to just kind of get your hands in there and start playing around with Google search data. Most of our data is public and you're able to actually access and explore Google Trends data on your own as well. Most of what we do on our team most of the insights that we find are actually straight from our Google Trends website as well. And so it's, you guys would essentially be able to do exactly what our team is doing every single day. The other 2 primary resources that I would recommend is our Twitter handle. So we have a Twitter with our handles at Google Trends. This is where we constantly publish out content that our team is finding or posting articles that we have found online that also uses Google Trends data. A third really good resource is we have a GitHub page. So our handle for GitHub is Google Trends as well. This is also another resource with a huge repository of data. These tend to be larger data sets that our team has been able to pull and that we want to make public as well, since we really believe in having open data on our team. So again, those 3 resources would be our Google Trends website, our Twitter, and our GitHub.
That's great. And we'll have links to all of those different resources in the description of this particular video after the live Hangout. So if you didn't get a chance to write down those URLs, not to worry, we'll have those linked for you. And you can also, by the way, you can find them all on the Trends tab on the g.co/newslab site as well. So Jen, tell us a little bit about Google Trends for those who have not been introduced to it before, maybe haven't touched it before. How is Google Trends different, say, than Google Search or maybe like autocomplete or something like that?
Yeah, so Google Trends data is, I would say there are 3 main characteristics for Google Trends data. The first is just the sheer size of Google Trends data. So Google Trends incorporates search, YouTube, and Google News data. And so with that, it just has this huge sheer size. Google search on its own has over 3 billion searches a day, but if we're adding in YouTube and news, and on top of that, looking at data since 2004 and now looking at data up to the minute, it's this huge size that we're able to really explore, and it's one of the largest data sets that we really have about humankind anywhere. The second really amazing thing about Google Trends data is it really does offer this honest insight into humanity. A lot of people are more honest with their Google search bar than they are on social media or with their friends and family. After large events, we'll often see people ask questions like, who is Harriet Tubman, or what is gun control? And those are questions that a lot of people aren't comfortable asking within social media, but they're able to ask on their Google search bar, which really indicates that we're able to get at this implicit insight beyond the echo chambers of social media. And then finally, there's this immediacy to Google Trends data. If you looked at our Google Trends website prior to last summer, you would have seen a 36-hour lag on any of our websites. And so Google Trends wasn't super useful for understanding the real-time nature of what's going on right now. Since then, we actually relaunched about, I think actually just a year ago today, we relaunched and we now have up-to-the-minute data, which really allows us to see these immediate insights, which really does uncover when an event happens, how people are reacting, whether it's a reaction about a news event or trying to understand what's going on around the world. You can see this immediate question that people have as they're trying to understand what's going on around the world.
Yeah, and we've seen this in a lot of events at scale. Events that have happened that are impacting large groups of people. Like the Tibet earthquake, I think, is one of them that I remember seeing a while back, and it looked like a lot of people were searching online for how to help. And for me, that gives us like a lot of warm fuzzies about humanity. It means people are actually out there trying to do good things. But I think, as you mentioned, it also really gives this interesting snapshot into the psyche of how people are searching online during events. Debates would probably be another one, and I think that what we're seeing, especially now that we're kind of more up to the minute, is you can really kind of chart, for example, the temperature of a particular discussion, or like how people are searching for a particular topic or issue when a politician is speaking during debate.
Exactly. One thing that our team has worked heavily on are these horse races that really show minute by minute search interest in different politicians throughout the course of a debate. And you can really see the effect that certain politicians might have with whether it's a statement that they have or an argument that they have when they shoot from the bottom of the horse race and then all of a sudden within a minute go up to the lead and then drop down again. So you can really understand the impact of different conversations and how people are kind of intaking that and digesting it.
Definitely. And we'll definitely be talking more about the data viz side of things and how to take this data and actually use it to visualize information and help tell stories. I think one question that, we get a lot from journalists and a lot from people is, about that, honest and immediate data. If I'm going online and, searching for my most private things with Google search in ways that I wouldn't perhaps talk with my friends, that information is anonymized. We're not going to be able to, Google won't be able to see what one individual person is searching. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely don't want to look at individual search interests. I tell my friends I can't see their searches. All of our data is anonymized and it's aggregated as well. So we're not looking at individual searches. We're looking at all searches within a city at a specific time, or all searches within a state at a certain time. And then on top of that, we also look at just a survey of searches every single day. So we're not looking at all searches at any given point. We're looking at a percentage of searches, which really does ensure your privacy and but at the same time, making sure that we're looking at a large enough sample size that it does accurately reflect the larger humanity.
And I think that sample size is really key too. So depending on what area you're in or what particular region you're in, that sample size might be smaller or bigger. And obviously that type of data that you're getting from that particular location changes. So if you're in a tiny, tiny town and you're searching for a topic that's maybe kind of esoteric or maybe not the most popular thing in the world, your results might vary. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that we were really cognizant of when we launched Google Trends is making sure that we were able to accurately compare different cities or different locations. We really want to be able to understand if a really small town or neighborhood has a really large proportion of search interest in a topic and not be outweighed by cities like Los Angeles or New York City that have these large populations. And so that's often why we don't show raw search values, because they aren't super meaningful when you are doing research. But when you're able to compare proportional interest, it really does show this insight into if these small towns have this amazing interest in a topic.
That's great. And we mentioned earlier about, the granularity of time, the fact that we can go minute by minute now. How granular or how small of a town can we look at? Can we look at just like my county or like my neighborhood, or is it at a city level?
Yeah, so within the geographic schema of Google Trends, you can first start off at a worldwide view. You can then winnow it down to look at a specific country, and then from there, look at regional search interest. And then on top of that, you can also look at specific cities. Within the US, you can look at what we call metropolitan areas. So for example, within California, we can look at San Francisco Bay Area. So that's San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland, rather than just looking at a specific city. One thing that others might have seen us do in the past are county level or local authorities in the UK, for example. In those cases, we're looking at cities and we're just mapping the cities to whichever county or local authority or region they might be in.
Gotcha. So I guess now's a good time to show people Google Trends and kind of dive into the, basically how to explore Google Trends online.
Yeah, definitely. Is my screen showing for you? Let's see.
Yep, you're all good.
Okay, perfect. So this is our Google Trends website. You can get to this by google.com/trends up here. So on our homepage, the first thing you would really see here is this featured stories carousel. This is a carousel of stories that our team within the News Lab curates together and looks for interesting stories that are relevant to the day's news. So we have the Orlando nightclub shooting, NBA Finals, Guns in America. You can really just kind of scroll across and look at different stories that we've curated insights around. Underneath our featured insights, oops, go back, we have this trending news feed. This trending news feed is really powerful in that it's a way of seeing what stories are trending at any given moment. So we look at 3 different detection signals when we gather this news feed. So we look at Google Search, YouTube, and Google News to find what stories might be relevant and that are trending across the web. Over to the right of every single trending story, we have this, what we call spark line, that really shows where within a given life cycle a story might be. So you can see with this story about the Euro Cup, something just happened recently and it just kind of shot up to the top within the last couple hours. What's really powerful about this feed is it really is kind of this, gives you this never-ending scroll with an infinite number of possibilities of different stories that you could kind of dive into and see what's going on around the world. Let's see. And then if we actually dive into one of these stories, so let's say we dive into this Euro Cup one, as it loads. There are a couple of things that we immediately give you when you do look at one of these story pages. The first thing is just a Google News banner up here, which tells you, which gives you a bit of context and background to what's going on within that story. So you can see here that there is a Wales versus England game that probably just happened recently. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see this blue line here is a search interest over time around this story. And then behind that, in the gray, within the gray bars, that shows the number of news articles that have been written about the story. One really interesting way to read this graph is to see where the different spikes for search interest occur versus where the different news articles have been written. And so you can see here, a lot of news articles were written previously, but now search interest is starting to increase again, and nothing new has been written about this most recent spike.
So with that particular example, Jen, one could probably infer that there is a bit of a bump in popularity for search terms just because of the news cycle and people talking about it, information getting into the public discourse, and then people going online to search for it.
Yeah, definitely. It could be that there was a bit of a lag. People are reading about the news just now and are seeing the story, and now there's kind of a search interest in it after reading about it on these news articles earlier today or yesterday.
That's great. And we actually have a question coming in from and I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, Farid Hamidi. And this might actually be a little bit about what you're going to be talking about next. He asks, how do we get a heat map of a particular search term in a geographical area? And I'm looking down here at the interest by subregion graphic here.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into this next widget. So right here, after you look at after you see the search interest over time, you can see the search interest by region. Here you can see the search interest within different US states. And I'll also give you the index search interest, which I can go into in a bit for every single topic. So you can see here that New York has the highest search interest in this story. If you also press this toggle, it'll give you a list of different, it'll actually give you the rankings for that story. You can kind of scroll down and see which region has the least amount of search interest. So you can see Mississippi cares the least right now about this story. One thing to note is that since we were on Google Trends with the homepage set to the US, we're seeing a US map right here. So depending on what story page you're on, if you're filtering your stories by the UK or France or so on, this map will be representative of whichever homepage you were set to.
So this can give you like a really good snapshot just on a geographical level of interest on a particular topic or across an entire region or entire country.
Yeah, definitely. It can really indicate what the regional patterns might be if certain areas are more interested than others. So you can see here, it looks to be a little bit more of an interest within the East Coast than there is within the South. So this really does kind of give you a really quick at-glance view of where people are most interested in a topic.
And is that only up to the minute, or is there a way to look at this kind of in a historical way and see how this has changed over time?
Yeah, definitely. We can look at this historically. So if you actually go to the Explore page, which we can go into next, that allows you to kind of manipulate or change out the different time filters. So you can change to look at search interest by within the last hour versus since 2004. And so you can really kind of change out the timeframes or the geo at a much more fine-grained way, so that you can look at how this heat map might have changed over time.
That's great. And looking at that heat map, you just hovered over Wyoming there for a second. Those numbers down in the bottom left-hand corner of each one of those individual cards, what does that number actually represent? Is that a percentage? Is that a volume?
Yeah, so that's probably one of our most frequently asked questions about Google Trends. What this value indicates is we're showing the normalized search interest in this story at a given place. And so what that really means is that we look at search interest in a topic as a percentage of all search interest on Google within that same location. So we're looking at search interest in this story in New York as a percentage of all searches in New York overall. After we look at that proportion, we index all of our values to the max search interest. So in this case, New York had the highest search interest in the topic. So we set that to 100 and we index everything to that value. The reason we do this is really goes back to what we had mentioned about comparing smaller places to larger places. So if we look at this ranking over here, you can see New York is first, which shows that it has the highest percentage of search interest in this topic out of all Google searches within New York. If we weren't doing this, then we would actually always see New York or California or so on at the top. But here you can see smaller places like Connecticut or Maryland or Illinois also coming up to the top, which shows that we're able to compare accurately these smaller and larger places, regardless of how many people are actually searching on Google as a whole.
So this has a lot less to do with how many physical people are searching in that particular area and more about the volume of change in a particular search topic relative to what people typically would be searching in that area.
Definitely. But we really want to allow people to accurately understand how people are searching rather than looking at just the overall population or overall number of people that might be searching on Google. So we don't want to always be showing Los Angeles or New York as the top places searching for a topic. We want to really be able to capture a little bit more depth than that.
And just to dig into that a little bit more too, so you mentioned you index it. Right now in this particular example, we're looking at New York as being up at about 100. And if we'd scrolled all the way down to the bottom, we would see somebody's probably at the lower end of the curve down. It looks like Mississippi is down there. It starts at 20. So is there a threshold that you have to reach in order, like, why doesn't it go all the way down to 0, for example?
Yeah, so the reason it doesn't go down to 0 is that Mississippi does have some search interest in the topic. So relative to New York, that shows that it has 1/5 of the number of searches that New York has. So New York has 5 times the number of searches of Mississippi. We do incorporate privacy thresholds. So there is a certain amount of, or certain threshold of searches that a given region or area has to have in order for us to detect it. And so in this case, Mississippi did pass that threshold, and that's why we were able to include it in here.
Gotcha. So as far as like that particular questions and just how the index works and how those numbers are related to one another, if somebody wanted to find more information out about that specifically, what would be the best place for them to take a look?
Yeah, so I think on our News Lab, you just pull up that site. On our newslab.withgoogle.com, we actually have a section. We have a tutorial that actually goes into what all the values mean, and that actually goes in depth into, into how we actually pull these values and how we normalize and index all these values. So I definitely recommend checking out our different tutorials on newslab.withgoogle.com as well.
Yeah, and we're going to be having more tutorials coming up specifically on trends in the near future as well. So if you have specific questions, and the audience is who I'm addressing right now, if you guys have specific questions, or if there's a particular part of trends that isn't well described yet, that you'd like a deeper dive or a tutorial on, this is a great opportunity in these office hours to let us know what exactly you would like to know more about and how we can best serve you with that information. So definitely let us know your thoughts on that. Okay, so Jen, let's keep moving on as far as diving into trends a little bit here. Do you want to take us through the Explore?
Yeah, definitely. One way to get to the Explore page is just at the top we have the search bar where you can explore any topic that you might be interested in. Today's the NBA Finals, so I'll just put in Stephon Curry as an example. Right when you put in a topic, as this loads, you'll see a couple of different widgets. At the very top, you'll see search interest in a topic by over time. So as this loads, you can see search interest since 2004 until now. You can see that he has the highest search interest now than he did. He has higher search interest now than he did last year. One thing to note with this initial widget that you see is that, again, we're showing these values on a scale to 100, which again means that we're normalizing and indexing our search interest. So specifically for any given point since 2004, we're looking at the percentage of searches in Curry over all searches on Google within those given parameters. And then after that, we again index our values. So we set wherever the max value is to 100, and we set all values indexed to that 100 value. If we scroll down a little bit more, you can see the regional search interest. So you can see that in the Philippines, they have the highest search interest in Stephon Curry. And if you scroll down, you can see it's Puerto Rico, then the US, and so on. Here again, we normalize and index our search interest to the right. So you can see that the Philippines is set to 100, which means they have the max search interest. And again, we index all of our values. So Puerto Rico is indexed to the Philippines, and so on.
And it looks like we've got little URL icons down on each one of these particular widgets. Does that mean that these are embeddable?
Yeah, so under every single icon here, you can see right here, there's an embeddable, there's a little HTML snippet, which would allow you to embed these directly on your website. And as new data is being pulled in, your embeddable will be updated in real time as well.
That's great.
Cool.
We were mentioning earlier that previous question about getting a heat map, and we were asking a little bit about change over time or being able to find a historical view of this. This is actually another one of those locations where if you just look down under the view change over time icon, it actually gives you a slider. So in most cases, you'll have enough search volume to be able to pull that up. And you can see how a particular region over time, a good example of this would be an earthquake or like a hurricane, for example. I've seen some really interesting visualizations of change over time within regional interest as a hurricane or as a search for like MH17, for example. We saw a lot of search interest change as that search for that plane changed as well.
If I actually pull that up, let's see if this one works. One other way you can do this rather than doing view change over time is you can actually, at the very top, we have these filters up here. So you can actually look at specific years or look at search interests within more recent days, so within the last 37 days and so on. So we could actually like look at this in 2013 and see what this snapshot might have looked like. Not enough search volume. But you'd be able to look at our search interests for different filters depending on the time frame you might be interested in. And then as well as that, you can also set custom time frames. So you could set them to since 2012 and so on. So if I just do 2012, 2016, you can kind of fine grain the search interest that you're interested in, or the time range that you're interested in as well.
And actually down at the bottom here where we're looking at right now where it says related searches, this is actually probably a good opportunity also to mention this idea of related searches or related queries, related topics. Tell us a little bit about that. And if I'm a researcher, if I'm a journalist looking at a particular story, I might not know exactly the words or the phrases that people are searching for in order to find more information out about that particular story. How can related searches help with that?
Yeah, so related searches, what's really powerful about the way that we look at Google Trends data is that we look at searches over a session of searches. So we don't look at just the single search itself, but we look at kind of the pattern of searches that you might be making. So you can see here that people might have started with searching MH17, but going on to search for crash MH17 and then Malaysia Airlines and so on. So it really kind of shows you this trajectory of different ways that people might search. An example for that might have been with the Orlando shooting last week. You could probably see searches starting off with Orlando, but they might have gone on to search queries like donate blood. And so they really kind of show this pattern of how people might be thinking, and as well as what other topics they might be interested in after they make that very first initial search. On top of that, we show both top and we show rising searches. The main difference between those two is that top really indicates what searches are being most searched by overall volume, whereas rising shows which had the highest increase or trend over time. So you can see here things like news, MH17 was trending or increased by a lot. We also see just search terms like crash had increased a lot over this time range as well.
And it looks like some of those have, instead of a percentage or a number value, it actually says breakout. What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so the way that we show the percentages is that we look at the increase in search interest for that topic between the range that we've selected versus one time range prior to one we've selected. So in this case, we're looking at January 2012 to January 2016. So we're looking at the percent increase in search interest for that phrase over the last 4 years. When we say breakout here, that's really because that term wasn't being searched prior within our baseline period. So prior to 2012, people weren't searching crash MH17 or so on. And so because we don't have this baseline, we set it as a breakout since we don't want to be dividing by 0 in these cases.
Gotcha. So it's just really more of an accuracy thing and just making sure we're not misleading.
Yeah, definitely. We don't want to be dividing by 0. And so in this case, we're showing that it increased at such a high pace, but we didn't really have that as people weren't searching for this prior to 2012, which makes sense in this case since it happened later than that.
And I noticed in the previous page that we were looking at, you said that that particular trend search went all the way back to 2004.
Yeah.
How far back does that information go? And if it's a historical piece, and I wanted to find out over a large span of time, do I have obviously like search hasn't always been around, but how far back can I go in those cases?
Yeah, so our data goes back from 2004. So let me just try another example. So if I put in something like coffee, you can see search interest all the way since 2004. In this case, you can see that it's kind of grown a little bit since 2004. When we're looking at the historical view in this case, we'll show data month by month. But you can also fine-grain this or fine-tune this a little bit. So you can also look at data within the past day. And here you'll see nearly minute-by-minute search interest instead. So you can see a little bump here in the morning probably as people are like getting up or something of that sort. And then if you also want to go into the very past hour, again, you can see just a minute-by-minute search interest here. So up till, it shows a little bit of a data lag, but you can see up to the minute in these cases.
That's great. And I imagine that search term is just a reminder to me for making Jen gets up so early in the morning to take do this. So thank you once again, Jen, for
yeah, of course. Sorry that coffee's on my mind.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Brandon Grams actually has a question. I think it might be a little bit related to this. He says, "Is there a way to download daily historical data over a multi-year period?"
Daily historic data over a multi-year period. There isn't an easy way. So it depends on what time frame that you've set within your range. So if we look at just, for example, January 2016, you can see here we have daily search interest here. So in this case, you would probably have to change out the time period so that it's at a small enough granularity that it's showing daily data. So here we're seeing daily data, and then you'd again want to go back to the previous month. So if we looked at, December 2015, so if we look at each month on its own, then we can see daily data one by one. And the best way to then get this data is we have this little 3 dots on the right side, and then you can hit download as CSV. And this will generate a report of exactly what you're seeing on the page, and will allow you to look at the data by day, just as you kind of iterate month by month.
And that's also a really good way to kind of take the data that we're visualizing here through Google Trends and actually using your own visualization tools if you wanted to visualize that. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely recommend downloading the data and seeing what you can find from it. There are definitely several different ways that we can visualize a lot of the data that we're showing here, and that'll actually be one of the topics that we dive into over the next 2 weeks, how we can visualize our data, and as well as what other tools you can use in addition to Google Trends to do your own reporting or to your own analysis.
Yeah, and just as a reminder for everyone who's watching, we'll in that session, I think will be in about 2 weeks, and we actually have Alberto Cairo, who's going to be joining us, who is a pretty well-known data visualizer himself, talking a little bit about how he uses these tools. Brandon Grams also has a second part to his question. He says, "Are users able to compare a single country search index against the worldwide index, as opposed to comparing a handful of single countries at one time?"
Yeah, so one thing that you can do is we have at the very top, it says compare search terms. Rather than comparing search terms, you could compare locations. And so let's say you wanted to compare a worldwide view. So say United States. Does it like, maybe it doesn't. I thought it would. But here in this case, you could compare different countries one at a time, or you could compare different regions within an area. So if I did United States versus, let's do like Alaska, you could compare the US versus an Alaska view. So you can compare different regional sizes rather than just doing a country by country or a state by state view in this case.
Yeah, and I'm actually pretty sure you used to be able to do worldwide. Maybe if you replace United States and do worldwide there, it'll let you select it. Huh.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Well, we'll make a note of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so we had actually another question, and then we'll need to move on just to make sure that we are keeping on schedule here. Shahir asks, he says, and we get this question a lot, he says, "I would like to get the trends of a local area displayed natively in a mobile app. Is there an API that we can use?"
Unfortunately, we don't have an API that looks at just mobile searches. We actually don't break our Google Trends data by mobile or tablet or desktop use. One thing that we have seen is that people can look at searches that might kind of suggest that people are looking at something on mobile. So if you wanted to say like gas stations near me, This might indicate something that people are searching on mobile instead of behind their desktop. So that would probably be my best recommendation, and do a search that might inherently suggest that someone might be on mobile rather than on desktop.
And that's great. We just kind of breezed through a little bit of the Explore features, but are there any other key features within the Explore page that somebody should know in order to be able to kind of dive into this? We were looking at what region and what time frame. We got a couple other features or filters there with categories and different types of search. What else should we know about?
So I'd say that there are two really great filters on Google Trends. So one is this all categories area, which allows you to filter searches by different categories. So example that we've looked at before are food and drinks, specifically recipes. And if you just choose a category, you can see what search terms might be related to that on its own. So here you can see that people are searching recipes, but you might be interested in what recipes have been rising over time. So you can see cupcakes have been increasing since 2004. Pizza has been increasing since 2004. And so this really kind of gets at digging into a data set without really knowing where you want to start. So this would offer more of an exploratory ability to just dive in and see what might be possible. Similar to that, you can also filter by where the search is coming from. So you can look at searches by web, searches when you're looking at just images or news or so on. So you can you can change these. The default when you do go to Google Trends are, so here you can see cake is one of the most top image searches. The default when you are looking at Google Trends is looking specifically at web search.
And that YouTube search is actually really interesting too. I think that a lot of times people forget that YouTube is actually quite a powerful search engine as well. It provides a lot of insights into how people are exploring the world around them. So, when somebody is doing a search within just YouTube, this could be a really good resource to just mine more information about what the world is interested in around a particular topic and how it's being discussed.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that we've really seen with YouTube search is just the rise of like how-to type videos and how people are turning to YouTube for things like tutorials. So really gaining an insight into what people want to learn is really powerful with YouTube search.
Now we kind of bounced around a little bit. We were just talking about the Explore tab and Explore page. Tell us a little bit of, let's go back to the trending stories feed. Take a look at some of those features. There's the feature like the spark line, and you might have some suggestions about processes or just the best way to go about using this.
Yeah, so there are a couple of really cool features with our trending stories feed. One is that you can actually, I'm hoping that this will show on, okay. You can actually click this button right here at the very top of the stories trending now, which will give you a full screen view, which you can probably put up on display and see what trending stories are trending all day long. This will auto refresh and update on its own. So as new stories do come in, you'll see changes within rankings. And if we play this for long enough, you'll actually see a little like ticker or like index to the left that shows if the stories increased or decreased in interest over time.
And I've actually been into a few newsrooms already where up on their monitors they'll have this along with Chartbeat and along with other news feeds to be able to just keep on top of like really what's going on, what people are searching for.
Yeah, so this is definitely really powerful to get all day insight into what's going on and just kind of allowing you to stay tapped into what people are searching for on Google. Another really powerful aspect to our feed is that we have, I kind of alluded to this earlier, you can filter our stories trending now by different countries. So we can look at searches, for example, just in the UK. And we can see how this story page might differ from the US one. So even though the Wales and England story is still on top, we also have other stories about like the Labour Party or a lot of these are very soccer focused at the moment. And then on top of that, say we didn't want to look at Euro Cup related searches, you could break down our trending stories by categories. So you could look at things just within entertainment. So up here at the top, you could choose which vertical you might be, or which category you might be interested in, and filter our trending stories by that category. Just a couple other examples. And then so one other really great thing about our google.com/trends page is our featured insights, which we didn't really dive into too much earlier. But at the very top, we have this carousel of different stories. If you dive into one of these stories, these are, again, stories that our team is curating. But all of the widgets on here are also embeddable. So here you can see that we're showing top questions on the EU referendum, which is actually just next week. And you can, what's powerful about this is you can, again, click here on the top right and actually embed one of these widgets onto your story page as well. So we have a little HTML snippet on the left for desktop and mobile as well. You can go down and we'll also show things. Here we're showing different search interests in leave versus stay in the European Union. And we also will post links to actual interactives that we've been working on that might be a little bit more in depth as well.
So just looking as you're scrolling, at some of these examples, some of those visualizations are actually rather complex. How do you go from the Google Trends page to a really interactive, complex example like that?
Yeah, so a lot of this power is really something like, find an example, something like this heat map that shows where search interest in the UK referendum or the EU referendum is highest. This is something that you could really get data from based off of our report. So if you are on the Explore page, I'm putting in EU referendum. Once you pull up the EU referendum page and you're able to filter the data based on the different categories that you're interested in. So if you wanted to see search interests in the last year or last hour, what I would recommend is to download the data as a CSV and then input that into kind of a visualizer tool or do any further analysis that you might be interested in, which is essentially what we're often doing. We're getting our data off of google.com/trends, exporting it, and then doing any additional manipulations that we might need before we do an interactive of this sort.
That's great. So we covered a little bit about the trending stories feed. We talked about the carousel. We took people through the Explorer tab. What other features? There's the subscribe to a topic option. Tell us a little bit about that.
So one thing that you can do is if you're interested in specific topics or specific stories, you can actually subscribe to get a digest of what these searches might be. So one example is if you click over to the left bar over here, you can see, I think it's trending searches. And we have this thing called hot trends, which actually shows you what hot trends might have been, what other stories might be trending on Google search. As this loads, give it a second. There will be an actual subscription tab so that you can actually, I think it's right here. You can actually subscribe to all the hot stories that we find on Google Trends. So you can choose if you want hot, hotter, or only the hottest searches to subscribe to and how often you want to subscribe to a topic. Another thing that you can do is if you're only interested in a very specific topic. So let's say you want to subscribe to searches around the NBA Finals. What you can do is on the Explore page, you can choose to subscribe to just that one topic to get a digest of trends around there. So you can, again, click this little plus sign and subscribe to searches around NBA Finals. And then you can also filter it based on the location that you might be interested in and the frequency of how often you want to digest around that topic.
That's great. And I got two quick questions that just came in from Farid and Shahir. Farid, he asks, is there a way to extract a search chain, how one search leads to another search? For example, search for Orlando is followed by a search on gun control? Yeah,
so a lot of that power is actually within, if I pull this back up, within the related searches. Since we are looking at a session of searches rather than a single search itself, you can kind of get here that chain of searches based on their relation to each other. So you can see that people search for NBA and then finals, then championship, and so on. If there are additional ones that you do want to research here, what you can do is, I think we only showed 10 at a time on this page. You can download the data as a CSV, and you can get a sense of, I think in those cases, we offer a little bit more related searches within the CSV report. You can see a little bit further to what other related searches there might be. And if there is this kind of relation between, I think your example is Orlando to gun control in that case.
So just taking a look at the queries tab there on the right-hand side, the way these are ranked right now, are these based on just search volume, based on that index, or are these based on the sequence of how people have searched for those particular terms?
Yeah, so these are based specifically off of the search index. So we look at, we rank the queries by which ones have the highest search interest. So in this case, NBA had the highest search interest. And we index all of our values to the max search interest. So everything is indexed relative to the search interest in NBA. Even though they aren't actually ranked by the sequence that people are searching, it does kind of give some insight into how people might go from one search to another when we look through and see what other related searches there might be.
Gotcha. So there's not necessarily a direct one-to-one correlation between like how people are searching and in what order those words are coming up. It's more about the popularity and the likelihood that somebody would search first for NBA and then second for whatever was the next one down from there.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's not just a one-to-one sequence. It's based off the popularity, exactly.
Gotcha. Shahir actually has another good question for us. He says, when are more countries going to be added to those list of countries? He does work for organizations in Egypt, for example, and the data just isn't available there, but they'd love to use this feature.
Yeah, so we're constantly trying to add in more countries onto Google Trends. Let's see. We've been adding in, we've been trying to make our data more robust for other countries. One thing that actually was updated just recently for Google Trends is if you look at a search term, we actually have these these topics within different search terms, which allows you to see a little bit more data than if you're looking at just the term or keyword itself. But those topics were just recently integrated for all different countries worldwide rather than just a few select ones. I don't have the exact timeline yet for when we might be able to launch in other specific markets, but that is definitely one of our priorities to make sure that we are looking at data for as global as possible.
That's great. And we were just mentioning a little bit ago, we were talking a little bit about subscribing. How does the subscription alerts for Trends, how does that differ than, say, for example, Google Alerts?
Google Alerts being do you have an example of a Google Alert? Sorry.
Yeah, so like with there's a product called Google Alerts, so you could actually sign up for anytime a website, for example, updates, or if there's a mention of like my name, for example, online, I can get an alert in my inbox when that actually occurs.
Oh, got it. So in this case, a subscription to a Google, to specifically a topic within Google search would basically give you an update whenever something has been trending or whenever a story has, rather than that a story is actually on the web, it's more showing that there's interest within that topic. So in this case, there might be stories year-round about the NBA Finals, but people might not be interested in the NBA Finals until just the week or the month leading up to it. And so you would get an alert just when you see that it started to increase within search, and you get a little notification within your email.
Yeah. So, probably one approach to this, if you wanted to stay on top of what was going on, you have that ability to pull up those trending topics that we were just looking at in the queue earlier. You have the ability to set up an alert for yourself so that, let's say I'm particularly interested in NBA Finals, but I don't want to keep on going back to Google Trends over and over again. I can get additional information right into my inbox in kind of a passive way. And then separate from that is Google Alerts, which is actually looking at not just search traffic, but it's looking for any instance of a mention on a website that's been crawled by Google. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but put together that actually creates this really robust toolkit to stay very much on top of the topic you care about in a little bit more of a passive way. I actually get these alerts in my inbox on a regular basis. So there's a wide range of topics that I'm interested in, from VR and 360 to education and journalism. I get alerts on all of those topics. And I have specific trending subscriptions set up for specific keywords that I might be interested in around one of those topics.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I definitely subscribe to both.
So we had a couple other recommendations too that we're going to cover here, and I know we're running a little bit long on time, but tell us a little bit, as far as like just the process of getting, into a search. Do I just take one particular source to find what's trending? Should I take a few different sources to find what's trending? What's the best, just workflow for that to get the most accurate data out of here as I can?
Yeah, so I would recommend to look specifically at web search if you're interested in different sources, so like within web versus YouTube versus Google News. I would recommend to look specifically at web search to start off with, but you'd be able to dive into other different sources. So I'd look at other different sources to see if there is another story that could be told alongside that. Since our data is most robust and has a longer history within web, I'd recommend to start off with there.
That's great. And I get a question from time to time in different markets. People have different concerns about data. We talked about the privacy element earlier and how all of this information is anonymized. One of the questions that we do get from time to time is about accuracy. And it's usually framed in the sense of like, well, how do, as a journalist, do I trust this data?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, I think the reason that we're able to, or I think the reason that Google Trends can really offer this kind of deep insight into Google search or into humanity is that since we are looking at such a large sample and we're looking at a subset of that within a sample size, just the data itself, because of its inherent largeness, we're able to really accurately reflect the larger humanities search interests. And so we're able to do research on such a large sample size that we're not really able to do easily within academia or within other companies as well. And so by being able to do this research in such a large sample size and such a diverse sample size, I think it really does offer this accuracy that people might be worried about.
And this is really just how people are searching, right? This is people going online, typing search queries into the search box and getting results back. So the data, the sample that we're looking at, it's pretty pure. I mean, it's just raw search interest and how people are looking for information about the world around them.
Yeah, exactly. By starting off with, by looking at search, I think a lot of people turn to search without really a second thought often. You might just turn to it to just ask a very innocent thought. And it really does show this like very accurate encapsulation of what people are thinking within the moment without being filtered in the way that people might filter within polling data or within other surveys. So it does offer this really accurate image of what people are thinking about.
That's great. So we have a few other resources we might want to mention here, beyond just Google Trends itself. We have a Twitter account and a GitHub page. Tell us a little bit about that GitHub page and what people might be able to find on that.
Sorry, let me go back to screen sharing. So we have a GitHub here at trends.github.io/data. Here we have different CSVs that our team has uploaded to what we call our Google Trends data store. And you're able to look through the different topics. You can also look at our little tags to find topics maybe about, for example, just like Bernie Sanders or California. And you can download these as a CSV and again, kind of do your own manipulations or analysis before uploading it to a data visualizer of your choice. Earlier we had mentioned our Google Trends Twitter handle as well, so I just want to show that. You can follow us at twitter.com/Google Trends. You can see the different the different trends that we've been posting just today. So top questions on coffee and cancer, for example. And so every day we're pushing out different trends that might be relevant.
That's great. And actually, just as another quick recommendation, Google Trends, as well as the News Lab's Twitter handle, I have these both set up for alerts on my phone. So anytime new information is being posted, I can keep very much up to date on what all the resources are that we're sharing, in addition to the Google alerts and in addition to the Google Trends alerts that I have set up. And actually, you can see right there our Twitter handle and our actual Hangout. It's very meta. I like that. Okay, so we got one last question, I think, from Lisa Lenore. I want to make sure we get her in here before we call it a day. Lisa says that she noticed on Google Trends when data is posted to GT Twitter, I'm assuming she means Google Trends Twitter, they're able to pull out questions around topics. How can we see this info directly from Google Trends? The question people are asking from search would be helpful.
Yeah, so adding questions to Google Trends is something that we are exploring at the moment. It's not a feature that is on google.com/trends currently. It's something that our team is able to curate and post on google.com, post on our Twitter handle. What you can do instead is look at the specific related searches, since that often does kind of indicate what people are thinking about within the moment. Like if you look at searches around Obama, often the top search is Obama age. And similarly, the top question about Obama is often how old is Obama? So the related searches definitely kind of encapsulate the type of queries that people are thinking about within the moment.
That's great. Appreciate that. Any last thoughts before we kick it off for the rest of the day?
No, definitely. This was great. Definitely come back to our second and third and fourth sessions. Next week, we'll be talking about data visualization, and we'll be going through some of the examples of what we've done within the News Lab with Google Trends. And we'll also be bringing on Alberto Cairo, who's just this icon within the data visualization world. So you can also ask questions to him about how he might visualize certain things as well.
Hey, sorry, we froze there for just a second. Can you just repeat that last part of what you just said? I think we're talking about Alberto Cairo and the upcoming Hangouts that we have.
Yeah, so Alberto Cairo, who's just this icon within the data visualization ecosystem, he'll be joining in to our Hangout next week as well, so you can jump in for questions about how you might want to visualize different cool trends, stories that you might be looking into.
That's great. And for all of you guys, folks who tuned in today, appreciate your questions and comments. Again, just as Jen was mentioning, for the next 3 weeks, we'll be joining Jen and a few other guests to talk more about Google Trends and go deeper and deeper within this. Feel free to shoot your questions on our Google Plus page on those live events, either during the event or beforehand. We'll aggregate all those questions and make sure we get those answered for you. And also, just as a reminder, check out our Google, our website at
Oh. There you are.
There you are. I was just talking about our website, g.co/newslab, where you'll be able to find tutorials and information and a whole host of other resources available for you. That's it for today. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you so much.